Hey guys, welcome back to a new episode of Dev Drawer. Today we're going to be going over some of the common functionality in the Chrome developer tools. And you also have developer tools in your other browsers, so Edge, Firefox. But since I use Chrome for the most part, I'm going to be going over how to do a lot of the stuff in Chrome developer tools, as well as some of the plugins that I use for development, for customization, stuff like that. So let's go ahead and get started. So first, what is Chrome Developer Tools? So Chrome Developer Tools is an application that's built into Chrome that allows you to be able to inspect elements and be able to see, the styling that's behind them, to be able to open up a console log and run JavaScript and jQuery and all that kind of stuff inside of it as well. And again, this isn't something that's just specific to Chrome, so whatever your browser is, you have developer tools. But inside of Chrome, there's 2 or 3 ways to open it. One way would be to right-click anywhere on the page, and then you can go to Inspect, and you can see that down here at the bottom, we have this little window that appears, and you can see as I move through, you can highlight different elements. If we wanted to inspect this button specifically, we could right click on it directly and bring it up here. Or also, you can anywhere else, you can just press F12 on your keyboard, and that brings it up as well. So I'm going to go through each one of these tabs so that you can kind of figure out which each one of those are about. The first one we're going to go over is this Elements tab. Now, this allows you to see the layout of your HTML. So let me expand this a little bit. You can see the layout of your HTML. So we have a card and then our card body. And then over here, you can see the styling for this card. So let's say on the body tag, right now we have where background color is like an off-white color. But I can come over here and either add something to this element specifically that doesn't stay. Most of the stuff that you do here, it doesn't stay. You can export it. But for the most part, it's kind of like testing and debugging. So let's say if I wanted to do something like background color red, you can see it'll change it in real time. Or instead of doing it over here, I can come over here and say background color is red, how I want it to be here. Or let's say over here on the body, we can right click on it and we can edit it as HTML and actually see stuff that we can modify within the HTML. So let me come over here and I want to add a class to it. So we're going to do class equals test. And then when we click off of it, now that class test is available, even though it doesn't exist over here. So we can come over here and hit the little plus sign, add a new style rule, and you can see body.test is now available. So we can also change the background color here as well. And it does the same thing for us. So it's just basically a quick way for you to be able to look at the code behind on a project, be able to look at how it's, the styling of it and everything. You can control it. And it does it all in real time. And again, it isn't something that you're not going to use this to build out the website. You're going to use this as a way to, test different things that you can do with the styling, test different things that you can do with scripting. You're going to be able to view things that the what's being stored in the session browser. So basically, the front end of the code is what you can modify over here. Now, if you're watching this video and you're an experienced developer, you're probably like, yeah, I know how to do all of this stuff. Well, that's fine. That's good. Most experienced developers use developer tools on a daily basis. If you are not an experienced developer and you never really heard of Chrome developer tools, this video is more for you than it is for an experienced developer. So I'm just going to kind of give you a crash course of what this does to kind of help you understand what you can use it for. Just kind of going over some of the common things that I use it for. So if you have experience with it and this video may not be specifically for you, maybe you want to figure out how to build what we actually created here, which I'll link in a card pop-up so you can actually see how we built this CRUD application system. But for developers who are interested in learning more about these developer tools and what you can do inside of it, definitely stay tuned because this video is for you. So now let's go into a little bit more. I'm going to go ahead and log in. Let me refresh it so it clears out everything that's on there right now. I'm gonna log in. It's been a while since I've opened up this project, but I believe it's tester and password. Okay, so this is like a simple project that we built for the actually, let me bring this over so it is docked on the side, make it a little bit easier to kind of see everything put together. Okay, so yeah, it kind of looks like my normal configuration. All right, so this project right here is just a simple CRUD application from the CRUD tutorial that I posted maybe a year ago or so. But what we're going to see here is everything that we can do to kind of optimize this website using Chrome Developer Tools. And we're going to take what we can do here, and then that's what you would modify on your code. But the more familiar you are with what this Chrome Developer Tools actually does, the better it'll make it for you when you go to update your website in the end. Okay, sorry for the pause. I found out that my screen recording wasn't capturing the entire browser window for some reason, but now it should be, so you can see the website, the styling, as well as the element selector here. And you can reposition this to kind of be where you want it to be at. So like I can click over here on the three dots, and then it shows you here whether you can put it in a separate window, dock it to the left, dock it to the right like we have now, or dock it on the bottom. Usually I put it docked on the bottom just because this makes it easier for me to kind of see. If I'm working in multiple applications, I might dock it where it's not part of the window itself, it's in a separate window. But for this video, I'm going to be running through it with it being docked on the right side, so you can kind of see everything at the same time. Okay, so let's get into just some of the basics that you can do inside of this. And like I said, you can expand all the way down. You can view specific elements. So if I wanted to view this specific element, I can come over here and see what the link is, what the link is called, what class it's using, where it's at. I can click inside of, let's say, this list item, and then it tells me what I have styled for that list item. Same thing with what goes on down here. And then you can also change things. So one thing that I've used it for is to change the password field into a non-password field. So I don't know if I have I'll show you it on the logout. So let's go into the logout. Like right now, if you type in a password here, it's not going to show you anything, but whenever you're debugging, sometimes you want to see that without having to do anything to your code that you have to go back in there and change. So we can do this in real time. So if we inspect this element specifically, we can come in here and change it from this password type to a text type, and it would allow us to see what this password is. So if we fill out our password again, so tester password, and we can see that it's actually populating that. And then if we hit login, it does the same thing that it would normally do if we had it set to a password field. So just kind of like a tips and trick, what you can do if you're trying to debug passwords, make sure passwords are getting entered into the right place. And it's not necessarily something that you need to use all of the time, but I have found that it is kind of useful if you want to see what's being typed into a password field, whether it's on a website you're developing, or it's on a Facebook, or another website that you're using that you're logging into that you can't remember what your password is. Maybe you have it where it's being auto-populated or auto-saved, and then you want to right-click on it, change it to text, so you can actually see what that password field is. Okay, so let's move on and go down to just going a little bit further into what all of this stuff is. So of course this is tied directly into the style sheet, the minified version of the style sheet that I have, as well as the SCSS, how it was being populated. So if we click on the reference that is right here, if we click on this, it'll bring up that entire style sheet that we did our customizations in. And we can modify things over here. We can add a new class to it, or whatever we wanted to add here, we can do that, and then it would be reflected on this page until we refreshed it. So whenever you're adding new things to your style sheet, you can always add them here and then copy this entire thing, copy the whole thing and paste it into your style sheet that you have. So any customizations that you make, you can make it directly in the browser, see how it looks, copy and paste it over. I usually don't do it this way. The way that I do it is like I showed you earlier, where you click on the element and then you make your modifications, and then you can just copy and paste this entire class that's created. So if we come over here, we can copy and paste this and just paste it into the code itself. So you make your changes and then you copy over your changes. Again, so it's not a real time, it's not modifying your application, it's just kind of showing you what it could look like based on how you currently have it set up inside of the browser. One thing to note is that elements that you see like this that are grayed out doesn't mean that they're not being used. It means that something is overriding them. So if we look in the, let's say the body, we currently have font size as 1 rem coming from the Bootstrap CSS, but then we're overriding that font size here with 18 pixels. So whenever it comes over, this is where it's initially being called at, but then it's strike through because the next element that is using it is actually changing that font size. So if we come over here and we change this to, like, let's say 45 pixels, it's not going to do anything because it's actually watching it here. So if we change this to 45 pixels, you can see that it obviously increases the size of the font throughout the site. And let's undo that. And so this part over here, that's what that strikeout is for, is because it's no longer being used inside of this class that it's being called in. It's used inside of this part that it's being called in. And then you can also change that to specific things. So like for this card, we can say that we want our font size, let's say 12 pixels. And you can see it changes the font size within the card to 12 pixels, and then it strikes through that 18 pixels that we had for the body. And then again, once you reload the page, everything is gone that you just added in there. So be careful, nothing that you add in here is going to be something that is, it's not going to stay there whenever you go to reload the page. So the elements editor is pretty self-explanatory, what you can and cannot do there. So let's move on to the next part of it, which is going to be sources. So your sources tab gives you a basically a general overview of your file system and what this page references. If you click on another page, it may reference a different JavaScript or something like that. So this kind of give you an idea of what you're currently looking at. So if we click on the index page, which we're currently on, you'll just see the HTML for the index.php. But then we can also see that it's referencing the initialize.js as well as the minified version. It has these images that are also included on this page. This is the fonts that it's using as well as the CSS that it's calling. And all of this stuff can be found inside of here. So it's just kind of giving you like a general overview of what's included on this page. So if we click on another page, so dashboard, they're probably going to be using a lot of the same elements just because it's a very simplistic CRUD application. But you can see that it's basically, it shows you different things. Like for example, this ID, first name, last name, phone, didn't exist on the other page. So this is being controlled by a different class, more or less probably the same class in this case. But everything else, you can kind of see the general layout of the entire application, the folders and the files that are being used for it. Okay, so the next tab is this network tab. If we click on here, this is used a lot whenever you're debugging maybe like a 404, maybe an image isn't loading, or if you want to see how fast your website is, this waterfall that's over here on the side can be used to tell you when an element is loading and how long it takes to load this element. So since most of this, it's like I said, very simplistic website, it's very quick, so there's not like a lot of stuff to be looking for over here, but basically it tells you how long it takes to download something. And what you have up here is you have this these options. So right now we can stop recording the URL, stop recording the network log, and then we can also clear out what's here. We can reload the page to start displaying the content again. So if we hit Control R, you can see that it pretty much loads it in real time, and you can see the waterfall that says what element took the longest, which took the shortest, when did it come into play, and then you can also scroll through this to find out which elements are maybe holding up load time, and maybe you need to, you have a very large script or style sheet that's being loaded first, and it's causing the rest of your page to kind of halt for a second. So it'll tell you that it's being loaded first. Maybe we should move that down to the bottom of the footer so that it happens later on and it doesn't prevent an image from being loaded or a certain style to be loaded. So you can check all of this stuff kind of as it's coming in to help you optimize your website just a little bit. And then they also have all of these other options up here where you can filter out by specific things. Normally I don't really mess with this part too much, just because they have the Lighthouse application, which serves pretty much the same purpose. It gives you ideas of what's wrong in your site. So I don't really use the network too often unless I'm just trying to find something that may be holding up, and then Lighthouse is telling me that this page is loading very slow. So I'm going to come in here and find out what's causing it to load very slow by running through the waterfall. Now the next tab that we have is performance. Again, not something that you would normally use unless you're looking for a very specific issue, just because Lighthouse over here covers most of it. But let's say we're going to go ahead and do what they want us to do. So we're going to hit the reload button up here and let it start profiling this page to see, it's going to give you basically another kind of waterfall view. And you can take this waterfall and you can use your scroll bar. You can zoom in on certain parts of it. You can drag and drop this to be able to see very specific when things were happening, what it was doing when it was happening. So let me take this and let's kind of see what it loads first. So whenever it first loads, it's basically coming in here and telling us that it's it's doing this before unload, and then it's doing a function call, and then it's before it starts parsing the HTML, it's hitting about 82.9 milliseconds, which is still very fast whenever it's going to parse that HTML. So this definitely is not a slow website. 122 milliseconds. That's probably because we're using Bootstrap is probably what the most load time is, but I mean it's just flat HTML that's being populated from a database. So not a lot that's going on here. If you're looking at like a full WordPress website, you may see this turn into a very big number, and then you would be able to see what that big number actually means, and you can kind of debug some things. But again, this isn't a tab that you would normally use unless you're looking for something very specific. So the next section is the memory section. This basically just allows you to see if there's any memory intensive resource hogs on your website. So you can come over here and take a heap snapshot, and it'll tell you what your entire system is kind of doing in order to figure out if there's any memory leaks inside of your application that may be affecting the browser as a whole. So again, not something you're typically going to use unless you're trying to fix an issue, or you're trying to, you're just troubleshooting, or you wanted to learn a little bit more about how your application or your website is interacting with Chrome, with your desktop in general. So you can kind of see everything that's being loaded at the same time. Okay, so the next section is going to be the application section. This is actually a section that I use fairly often. It kind of tells you what you're pulling from, like the database, if you're storing anything in a session, if you're storing anything inside of a local storage object from JavaScript. It tells you any kind of cookies that you're storing, and then it also gives you this, which will tell you if there's any detected frames. Right now we're using the top frame, which is basically the website itself, but this is a good way to kind of see if you have any kind of security issues that inside of your website. So if you have an iframe that's being embedded on your website, maybe it's showing a something that wasn't put there by you. You can see that where it's coming from, and it'll also run a few tests for you to see if there's any kind of cross origin I forget what it's called, but scripting, so any kind of cross-site scripting or anything like that. So right now, obviously, we're not using a secure page. It's only local environment, so this part right here is not really important to this site. But if you look at this on like a full functioning, website that's public, there may be some more information here that's provided to you that could help you troubleshoot some kind of security issues that you're having. What I typically use this for is the storage abilities. So if we click here, we can see that currently there's nothing being stored inside of our browser. We're just basically creating a login and then running through it. So what we could do here is you just have to remember that you have local storage is JavaScript created. So it's actually being created inside of the browser itself, and it will stay inside of the browser until they close out. Same thing with your session, but this is actually being set as a session variable inside of your PHP. You can come over here and right click on it and add. Where's it at? There's an add button here somewhere. So, well, there's usually an add button there. There is not an add button here. Well, there's supposed to be a add button here that you can add new variables if you wanted to. What I use this for whenever I'm testing out something is, let's say if I wanted to retrieve an email from a database and then I wanted to store it as a email of this test person that's currently logged in. What I would do is I would either set a local or a session variable, and then inside of that local or session variable, it would give me the key, which would be email or whatever I set it as, and then it would give me that value. So I can come over here and edit the key and edit the value to see what's being populated and make modifications to it. So let's say if I wanted to change this person's name, I could come over here, and if it was being stored as a value, I could right click on it, modify it, and change that to test person 2, and then it'll keep that value as I'm browsing throughout the website. So if I click on dashboard or new users, new employee or something like that, it'll actually make it where the PHP script would recognize it and change it here if it's being pulled from the session storage, or if the JavaScript is the one that's doing the pulling, it would be changed here. So this is just kind of a way that you can test out some values to see what kind of values are being stored, and if there's anything in here that you can just play around with to see how it's working. Same thing with your cookies. You can add new cookies that your PHP application or your JavaScript application is going to be looking for, and you can just store those. You can set their time to life, where their domain is, what the value is, all this kind of cool stuff. So you can essentially control some of the stored information whenever you are creating an application like this and you're needing to store which login was used in order to access this page. This is where it's going to be stored at. It's going to be inside of your application. So I just remembered we can double click on one of the blank values, and either the session storage or the local storage, you just double click and you can modify it or you can add something to it. So if we click on here, let's say we want to do name, and then we're going to set the value as test person 2. Now that's not going to update anything on our site because I don't remember what this value is that's supposed to be held for this. But what we can use is, since this is now a local storage, I'm going to switch over to the console and kind of show you some of the stuff that you can do over here. So we're going to remember that we have name as test person 2. So this is the console. The console is pretty cool. We can do like whenever you're creating a JavaScript or you're trying to modify it, make changes, what you would normally put inside of it to see your variables, you can do console.log, and then like something like test, and then this is basically what's that. Whenever you run this kind of code inside of your JavaScript, this is where it's going to appear. Let me clear that for now. So basically you saw that it said console.log test, and then it pushed it down below it because this is what we're going to be pulling. So since we set this application variable key as name in the console.log, what we can actually do is do a local storage.get item. So we do local storage.get item, and then I believe that this is what we do. Local storage get item key, and then it's a name, not test. So let's do this again. So name, And as you can see, because now this name key has been created, or any of the variables that would be created over here, you can access those by doing your local storage.get item, whether it's inside of your JavaScript or it's actually inside of this console window itself. This console window itself is like an interactive place for you to be able to do scripting. So right now we have this local storage set, this name is being set to test person 2. So what we could actually do is I'm going to right click on this and I'm going to inspect this element, and let's just say right now I'm going to edit as HTML. We're going to put this inside of a span. We're going to do span class equals name, and then we're going to end that span here. So now we have this wrapped inside of a class. So what I could do on this side is, I believe I could do name.html, and then we're going to make it equal to that local storage get item name. And let's try that again here. I did not update it on there. Oh, that's because I need to make it actually pull the class. There we go. So now you can see on this side it updated this. So basically what I'm getting at is that this application tab allows you to control data. So let's say if we wanted to change this to test person new. Now whenever we go to run this command that we did the first time, and we go to run this inside of our JavaScript or running it inside of the console if you're doing test, you can see that you can change it in real time, because this is just like a interactive scripting editor. And what I usually use this for is whenever inside of my HTML script, my JavaScript that I'm pushing together, I will create these console.logs and then log something directly to this console window. So whenever this page runs, it runs and then it hits this console.log, which then shows whatever value that I'm trying to push out. So this is a good way to kind of check what you're doing. But you can also run full scripts inside of this. So let's say if we wanted to do something like variable num equals 0. Gotta write the whole thing. So var num equals 0, and then shift enter so it doesn't run the code. So, and then we want to do something like let's see, what would the for this be? So let's do a while num is less than 10. Let me do that again. You got to remember not to press enter, press shift enter. And then we're going to do console.log num. And then we're going to do num plus plus. And then close it out. So as you can see, we can pretty much write any kind of JavaScript inside of this window and it will show you the result of it. So this is a good way to test JSON scripts that you're getting back. You can go in there and do your for each loop, run a console log on the data, and it shows you all of the information that's being produced. So the console is very good to use for testing data, for testing your JavaScripts or modifying things inside of your JavaScript. If you're not ready to implement it yet, you can kind of test it here, maybe create it in VS Code and then copy and paste it, run it in here, see if it does what you want it to do, and then run it in the actual application. So console log is just a good way to kind of show in real time JavaScript stuff that you can do. And finally, the last thing we're going to go over, so right now can't show you anything with security just because this isn't a public website, but you would be able to see the security overview of your website if this was a public website. But the last thing we're going to go over is this Lighthouse. So Lighthouse is pretty cool if you're worried about SEO, accessibility, and your performance. This is what I always use it for. So you can just kind of check the things that you want to do. So let's go ahead and run a performance report. And what it'll do is it will show you things that is currently wrong with your website. So obviously nothing really wrong with this website, just because it's not public, it's not load intensive, so the performance of course is always going to be good, but it shows you all of this information for your website. And then it gives you opportunities that you can do, and you can click learn more to see what those opportunities are. And then it also shows you things that you've passed, and then things that you failed. Some things you won't be able to fix, but there is things that you can fix. Like for example, you might have eliminate render blocking resources, but if we check on this, well, all of these are included, but sometimes you'll have like scripts for Facebook or scripts for Google Analytics and stuff like that, and they may be something that you can't modify. And if you're using something like Bootstrap, you're going to see the remove unused JavaScript, just because it's using functionality that may not be necessarily used on this specific page, but it is something that is being used by Bootstrap itself. So some of these things you can't get rid of unless you kind of write everything from scratch. So it's completely up to you. But everything else, like this preload key request, it'll show you what you need to do in order to fix this issue. And then it'll make your score go up even higher. So let's clear this out, and let's click on, let's say like your SEO report. Obviously this is going to have a bad SEO report because I haven't done any SEO for it because it's not public. But what it'll show you is stuff that you need to know. Oh wow, it didn't actually get that bad. It'll show you stuff that you need to know in order to make your website be more SEO compliant, SEO friendly, and it's good to use this Lighthouse tool if you're trying to optimize a website for Google, because this is a Google tool. So, and it just kind of goes through the same thing. So you have your past audits, which gives you all the information that you've passed, and then also the things that you could be doing better. And like this right here, if you hover over it, the image.image fluid, if you look on the browser side of it, you'll see that the DevDrawer logo is actually highlighted because I didn't add an alt tag to it. You can see, right below my mouse that the image source doesn't have the alt tag associated with it. But again, this isn't something I would worry about with an app like this, because we're not necessarily trying to do SEO for it. But whenever you're doing like a large WordPress website, or you're building out a flat HTML website that's going to be for the public that you want to get listed on Google search engines, this SEO tab may be something you can look into. So let's clear that out. Now accessibility is another big one that you need to be worried about. This one's probably not going to do too well on accessibility, because I don't think that I've done too much on it either. But let's go down to our accessibility. And so one thing that you're going to see often is the background foreground colors do not have significant contrast. Like my foreground is white, my background is off-white. So that's fine. And then you have, for each one of these elements, you have your it's some of these things you can't fix unless you really try to specifically fix them for this report. It's not always going to be where it's a typical design practices or development practices, but this gives you a good idea of what could be failing and kind of puts you up where you're not having any kind of accessibility issues. So people that have disabilities can view your website like it's supposed to be viewed, and they can actually see things and or do things that they need to be able to do. So this just kind of gives you a way to make sure that you're kind of sticking as close to those accessibility guidelines as possible. So let's clear this out, and let's run a PWA and best practices reports, just because. I don't normally use the PWA, which is the Progressive Web App. Not really. We use, what is it called? I can't remember what it's called, but there is an actual Google plugin you can add to a WordPress website that gives you the PWA. So obviously PWA for this isn't doing anything because I haven't done anything with it. PWA is basically like a app version of your website. So what is it called? I cannot remember what it's called. I can't remember what it's called, but there's an app that we use, or a plugin that we use on our WordPress websites that does the PWA for us. But essentially PWA is kind of like functionality for your website that can be translated into an app. So if you remember on the application, you have these service workers, your manifest, all this kind of stuff. So your manifest is like, it's the manifest that contains like your favicon and stuff like that. So whenever someone saves your web page as a link on their desktop, it'll actually show the correct icon for it. Your service workers is if you want to do push notifications, you would hook up a service worker for it. But that's essentially what this PWA is for. And obviously this one fails completely because I haven't done any kind of PWA for it. It's not something I was worried about whenever I was building it. But let's go to our best practices and see what we have here. So obviously local site doesn't use HTTP. And then we have some vulnerabilities in JavaScript or jQuery, so we probably need to upload or update the jQuery version that we're using on this. But it just kind of gives you another idea of what you can do to improve it. For the most part, whenever you push out a website, your performance, accessibility, best practices, and SEO should be green for the most part. Most of them should be green. If they're orange, it's okay, but you can see the things that you can change inside of it. But try to get all of these as green as possible, because if you do, it does help with your search engine and indexability, stuff like that. So just something that Lighthouse it's a pretty cool tool that's built into your browser that'll help you with a lot of the SEO stuff that you do, a lot of the security stuff that you do, and your performance. So that's pretty much the crash course on Google Developer Tools. It's something that as you get more experienced with development, you get more experienced in what you can use to help out with that development. And Google Developer Tools is something that it's going to come up almost every single time you're working on a website, whether you're using the Lighthouse to generate these reports or you're checking elements and modifying things to see what they look like before you actually make changes to it. So as you get more familiar with becoming a web developer, Google Developer Tools is going to become something a little bit more important to you. So last week I went over what I did in Visual Studio Code, what my setup was. So I also got the question, what plugins or add-ons do I use for Chrome in order to make my process flow a lot cleaner. So as you can see up here at the top, so let me close out of this. Oh, there's one more thing I want to show you before we get into that. So there's also this button here. This button right here is very cool because it allows you to see a mobile version of your website. I don't think I've done any kind of mobile functionality for this, but it'll give you an idea. So if you wanted to see what your website looks like in a mobile version, you just click on this little toggle device toolbar up here, and it shows you this. And over here, you can switch it to a different phone type. You switch it over to an iPad size or a tablet size. You can rotate it. So let's go back to like an iPhone X and then rotate it, and it'll just show you like your mobile responsive version, so you can actually check on the mobile responsiveness of your website without having to load it into a third party or try to take a screenshot or resize the browser manually. It does all of that for you, so you can kind of use the interactivity of these elements and change them up based on the mobile style sheets as well. Okay, so having said that, I think that's all that I needed to show you. So let me untoggle that and then click out of this. But last week, whenever I went into my Visual Studio Code, I realized that I could show you some of the stuff that I use on the browser that also helps me. Okay, so I found out a way to show that, but this is what I was talking about. So whenever you click on this, I have these presets to the different sizing that I normally use. Like if I wanted to, this is the actual pixel size that I'm looking for. So if I click on this, it would resize my browser, which I don't want to do right now because of the way that I have it set up in the capture. Or I can come in here and create my own new version of it. So again, this one is called Window Resizer, and it's just you can use the developer tools like I just showed you, or you can use this. Either way, I've kind of been using both for a long time. And then this next one over here is the Colorzilla. Colorzilla is a really cool tool. So anytime I want to see what color is referenced on a page, I can click this page color active or picker active, and whenever I hover over an element, it will show me what color it currently is in RGB as well as hex. So it's a pretty cool little tool if I'm trying to extract a specific color from a page, or maybe like someone sent me over something in a Google Drive and it's an image. You can still use this color picker tool to be able to pull out something from there. And you can also click on it and go to the color picker and see some of your most recent colors that you've added to it, or you can come in here and kind of customize it. So let's say if we clicked on this blue over here and it presented us with something that kind of looks like this. Well, we can also see maybe we want to have a hover color, we want to make it just a little bit darker, and that's going to tell us what that hex color is going to be, so we can add that to our CSS. So that's another tool that I use very often. And then this one's Push Bullet. This one's a personal thing for me, but it basically just allows my phone to connect to my Windows desktop, so I'm not going to go into that one. LastPass is something that I definitely recommend for password security, especially if you're managing hundreds of different websites. You can auto-generate these secured passwords, and as long as you remember your master password, you can make it where your passwords are very secure because you don't even know them. As long as you don't forget your master password, or else you get locked out of everything. So something you can definitely look into doing is LastPass. The next thing I have over here is the Nimbus screenshot tool, and I use this a lot because it gives you these different options. So I can create a screenshot of what I'm currently seeing on the page. I can capture a fragment. I usually use the selected area, so if I click on selected area, I can come over here and highlight what I want it to be, and then I can either edit it and save it or just cancel it. So if I click on edit, it'll open up in a new tab and it'll show me this, and then maybe I wanted to draw something on it, I can draw something here. So this is a really cool little tool that I like using. Again, this is the Nimbus capture, and all of these are free on Google Chrome, the Chrome extensions page, so for Google Chrome. So all of these are free. Let's see, what is this one? Grammarly. Y'all have seen my spelling, so I don't even have to explain this one too much. If you don't know what Grammarly is, definitely Google it. Grammarly has saved me a lot of time. It has like a desktop version of it as well as the browser version of it. So if I'm over here and I type in, well, I don't know if it'll work on this, but let's try it. So let's do like tester D. No, it's not going to work. So basically what this will do, it checks in real time your spelling. So I've never tried it for another language outside of English, so you might want to look into that, but I'm pretty sure there's something out there that's equivalent to it if it doesn't do non-English languages. But I use the desktop version of it for my email and for Word, and then inside of this I use it whenever I'm doing a response to something, or I'm typing something in a forum, or adding a Facebook post or something like that. It checks your spelling in real time, which is a huge lifesaver because, as you've seen in my previous videos, my spelling is terrible most times. So this kind of keeps me in check. Next thing is this Reddit Enhancement Suite. That is a Reddit add-on where you can kind of customize some of the Reddits that you may be interested in. I'm not going to go over that one because not everybody uses Reddit. And then I have my security stuff for uBlock, vidIQ, and live server. This live server is something that I've went over before. Whenever you use like the live server extension for VS Code, that's something that you can pair with it. And I believe that is all of the ones that I have on there. So the ones that I mainly use is this window resizer, this Colorzilla, this Nimbus screenshot, Grammarly, and that's the ones that I use for my web development. So if if you're interested, you can find all of those inside of Chrome's extensions or Chrome's plugins or whatever they call it. But that's the ones that I use. So I think that's going to kind of wrap up this video for me. So I hope you liked it. I hope you learned a little bit about Google Chrome developer tools, and maybe some of the add-ons that I use for my Chrome browser, and it'll make your life a little bit easier. So if you did like it, give me a thumbs up. If you're not a subscriber of this channel and you like videos like this, or you like straight coding tutorials, I try to do them once a week. So hit the subscribe button, hit the bell notification so you'll know whenever there's a new video being posted. But I think that's going to do it for this video. I appreciate you watching, and I will talk to you later.